afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you all for staying. I know we are few in numbers, but this is the last session for today, and I will be your moderator for the next hour. My name is Nicole Betton, and without further ado, let me introduce our speakers. Mrs. Veronica Forbes Blake is currently the Administrative Officer at the Hugh Winter Fertility Management Unit at the University of the West Indies, Mona campus. Are you hearing me? Is everyone hearing me? Okay, I'm a little short, so there we go. Is that better? Okay. Mrs. Forbes Blake has served the UA in various capacities for a period of over 29 years. She has a Master of Science in Government. She enjoys writing, reading, and public speaking. She is married to Eglon Blake, and the union has produced Brianna Blake. Dr. Sharon Williams Brown is a licensed Mrs. Sharon Williams Brown is a licensed psychologist and a senior counselor at the University of the West Indies, Mona, where she has worked for over 20 years. She has provided counseling to students and staff and is responsible for providing oversight of the UA Helps telephone counseling service. She also coordinates the peer support provider, which is a peer counseling program, and writing psychoeducational material for UA counseling service. Miss Georgiana Richardson is currently based in Trinidad and Tobago and has worked at the University of the West Indies for 38 years. She's qualified with a Master of Science in Economics from the University of the West Indies, a postgraduate diploma in Management Information Systems, a Master of Science in Safety, Health, and Environment, and a certificate from UN Women's Foundation trained in gender-based violence. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker, who is Mrs. Veronica Forbes Blake. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, I'll be speaking on the topic, resilience mechanisms in higher education. We're looking at building blocks for healthy mental attitudes and behavior. There are two authors for this paper, yours truly, and Dr. Vernon Da Costa. He is the director of the Hugh Winter Fertility Management Unit at the UWI Mona campus. The story is told of the elephant. The story is told of the elephant and the lion. Now, whenever the lion sees the elephant, what comes to mind? It's a rhetorical question, of course, and vice versa. The elephant is seeing the lion, hey, what's going on there? The lion is seeing the elephant, what's going on there? When you look at the size of both animals, one is small and one is big and powerful and heavy and all of that. But the story is so that whenever the lion sees the elephant, he sees lunch. So we're looking at resilience this afternoon. So it all depends on the lens through which we are looking, and it all depends on how we are able to bounce back. The lion realizes that there's strength in numbers, and therefore if the elephant is attacking the lion, and the lion decides to gather momentum by getting back up, then they can mount that elephant's back, start biting into his back, another starts nibbling on the leg, and before long, that poor elephant is no longer, he is lunch. And so the objective for this afternoon is to highlight how resilience building blocks can be used at a greater level in some cases to promote healthy mental attitude and behavior on campus. Of course, we realize that in some cases, it needs more than just being resilient. In some cases, it needs therapy, it needs counseling, it needs referral to the professionals. But we're looking at those students in our care on a daily basis who are faced with the potential of becoming mentally ill and how we can seek to help them along the way as we also help ourselves and our counterparts. Now, the introduction, it is reported that 35% of freshmen have mental illness. This is quite frightening. This is 2014. Caribbean higher education institutions can better promote positive mental health and attitude. So that's the importance of looking at the topic. We also want to look at retention and graduation rates. We want to have them increased because at the beginning of the academic year, we might find ourselves with a number of students, and about halfway through the year, towards the ending of the year, we might find that the retention rate decreases. So what can we do as administrators to increase the retention and graduation rate? Cost saving would also be facilitated in looking at mental illness. Decreased medical bills, less psychological impact on students. And what about the families? You have one child and you decide to send that one child to the university. And halfway along that career path, that child falls ill. What happens? What becomes of the dreams? That's a psychological impact on the family as well. And also less socioeconomic cost, because it has a cost that will also impact the society at large. Okay, so for the conceptualization now, resilience speaks to the ability of people to achieve good outcomes in spite of serious threats to adaptation or development. This is from Masten. And for mental health, it's a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, etc. Hence, mechanisms that encourage the ability of people to achieve good outcomes. So that's what we want to look at. And we are looking at the building blocks for promoting well-being. Sounds like quite a mouthful. Okay, for the methodology, we looked at a documentary research format, and the work of several authors has been looked at. We looked at Sherry Benton, who is an affiliate of the University of Florida with online patient engagement tools. There's Daniel Eisenberg et al., University of Michigan, Queen's University Commission, this is Canada, Laura Davidson et al., leading experts from U.S. universities, and Marjorie Baldwin, health economist at Arizona State University. Of note, Marjorie is the mom of a schizophrenic son. And so, the question might be asked, we're dealing with the Caribbean, so why are you emphasizing the North American system? All right, we're dealing with information that we could actually get. And these are readily available, and we might also say, but it's a different setting. In the US, in Canada, look at their economic base. What we can do as Caribbean higher educational institutions, we can look at our needs and tailor the recommendations to meet our need. Okay, so for Sherry Benton, her advice, she has several building blocks, and they're as follows: do not self-medicate. We'll find that some of the students who come into our care, they think that all of their peers are using marijuana. So if I'm here studying and I'm not doing well, wonder what everybody else is doing. So instead of finding out, I as a student could say, all right, I think everybody is drinking. I think everybody is partying because the stresses of life are increasing. So let me go party. Sherry is saying, do not self-medicate. Be proactive about overall health. And some of these would have been spoken about from morning. Overall health, we might be saying, but with mental health, why is it necessary to look at my general health? Well, Mrs. Brown could tell us that sometimes if we neglect our everyday health, if we refuse to get sufficient sleep, if we refuse to do our exercise, if we don't breathe deeply, if we don't strike a balance, if we just go on and don't bother with the mental, with the health, the physical health, we don't do our checkups, then we might find ourselves in serious waters. So Sherry Benton is saying, be proactive about your overall health, and that in itself can help with the mental health. We're also to know when it is time to ask for help. Sometimes the signs are there and they are being ignored. It is important to know when to ask for help. Also meet with a professional. Some of our students are there and they are struggling and they are afraid of stigma, so they would never think of meeting with a professional. But at the UWI Mona campus, we have a system where you can make phone calls, anonymous phone calls, and you can get help. So within the Caribbean, measures have been used to help to fight against the effects of mental health. But these that I'm speaking about, I'm saying how we can use them at a greater level. So this paper is not saying we have not made any strides. So please don't misunderstand that. I think strides have been made. When you look at Daniel Eisenberg, he is saying, get academic advising. Sometimes when the students come to us at the higher educational level, our focus is on getting them in the classrooms, getting them to pass, getting them to do well. But it is important that we realize that they're whole beings, so there are other facets to them. Take, for instance, a rural community in Jamaica. And this child is coming, he's the first from his family entering university. The whole of his community might be on his head, figuratively speaking. You know, Tom got through for UE, he got through for UTech, and the entire community is there backing him. And he realizes now he has this great pressure being placed on him. Should he fail, what is going to happen? They're going to laugh at him, all of that. So academic advising would speak to just going beyond dealing with your classes, your exams, but preparing you. We also looked at online programs, and somebody spoke to that earlier. There are programs online that the students should be able to tap into to help them to determine whether or not they are at risk for having mental illness and how they can deal with it. And when you look at student data analytics, we also, within the universities, we have a whole lot of data. When you go to the admission section, when you go to the faculty offices, there's so much information that is being collected. How can we as administrators use that information to help us to determine warning signs for the students? When we look at their profile, can we look at it carefully to see, could this person be having problems? This one seems as if they're not being able to cope with the workload. They might be having financial stresses, all of that. And Eisenberg also speaks to first-year experience seminars and other courses. Now, I have been at the UE for 29 years, and I usually watch with interest as the first-year students come. You see a fellow coming, you know he's coming from the country. He's in a cap, he has an umbrella, his mom is with him. If he's going to the library, she's right there with him going to the library. Oh, miss, where's the bank? And you want to say, Mommy, it's okay. He's going to be fine. Allow him to walk and to read. But you know, the mother instinct in us, who are the mothers? It's a rhetorical question. So the first year experience, after that mom packs her bag and returns to her car, that sheltered son now finds himself in the big, wide Kingston, on this big campus, having to make all sorts of decisions. The parents send this amount of money for the month. This child now has to start budgeting. So if we can look at the various experiences of these people, just coming out of high school, sheltered, protected, you're giving your lunch money on a daily basis. Now you're being given the money on a monthly basis. So you know if you use it out, What is going to happen halfway? How are you going to eat? How are you going to get your books? All of that. So first year experience seminars and other courses could help to prepare our students better. And you could say there's orientation, but we could look closer. What else is there with regards to mental health that could be incorporated? Peer group supports. On the Mona campus, probably other campuses, you have peer support groups in various areas, the residents and others. So you're able to meet with people on your level, on a one-to-one, or probably in small groups, and you have other people sharing their perspectives. So these students can actually learn from them. And then he also speaks of prevention and intervention services. So for the students who are coming to us, we also have to try and determine, did this student enter our institution with problems? Because some of these people coming to us, with problems, and then they come in a new environment, it is adding stress to stress. When you look at the workload, when you look at the amount of assignments to do, you're allowed to go to the library. It is no longer high school where you have to go and sit in class for 3 hours or 4 hours supervised. No, you're now on your own. So it speaks to things like time management and all of that. All right. We're looking at the building blocks that were given by Queen's University, Canadian perspective. All right. This commission speaks to promoting a healthy community and a culture of health and wellness. This is on campus, understanding and helpfulness. Sometimes when the students come to us, we see them as a bother. Don't answer. Sometimes we see them as a bother. It's lunchtime, I'm late for lunch, and there's a student coming, looking despondent, they can't find their way around, they need a job, they need a scholarship, and it might not necessarily even be our department that is responsible for that. How do we treat them? It's 4:30, we run in to catch the bus, the traffic is building up. How can we as administrators promote a healthy community and a culture of health and wellness, understanding and helpfulness? Sometimes in passing the students, just a smile. Hi, how are you? They might not want to answer, they might think you're over-friendly, but there's another set. Might stop and say, look, somebody cares. All right, another thing here, another point, facilitate transitions / adjustments to university life and foster resilience, coping and other life skills. So when we speak to fostering resilience, that is being proactive. So instead of sitting and waiting to see if 20% of the students will fall along the way, if we see the signs coming, they're glaring, what can we as administrators do to intervene? We might see a student going astray. Probably just taking that student aside. Hi, how are you doing? How are you making it out with your library hours? Just find out from them what's happening. It could make a difference. So we should be able to try to facilitate transitions and help them to develop coping and other life skills. What are some of the life skills? The time management, the budgeting. We have others. Organizing themselves, preparing themselves, life skills. Skills that can help to fit them into the society and help them to be productive. Queen's also speaks to actively encouraging, help-seeking, and helping behaviors. So for those students who might be in need of assistance, accommodation and treatment to students in difficulty, we need to ask ourselves, what can we do to encourage these students? We have an open door policy that you're having a problem, you can feel free to come to us. Provide accessible, high-quality health services. I think on all the campuses we have health services, and sometimes with the stigma that is attached to mental health, it could prove useful if the mental health is incorporated into the general health services. For one, the stigma would be lessened because you see me going to the health center, you can know what I'm going about. And if we treat it as, well, it's not really a regular illness, but then people are in need of help, and so we We seek to foster that. All right, running through Davidson now. He speaks to promoting social networks, helping students develop life skills, identify students at risk, increase student helping seeking, restrict student access to potentially lethal means of self-harm, suicide. We have all of that to deal with. And then for Baldwin, quickly running along, after diagnosis, maintain contact with student and family. So we have some students who they become sick along the way. Do we just throw them away, provide counseling and support services to assist in the student's success when re-entering campus? Because sometimes they can't afford to return. So let me run now to the results. So the results are the findings. Resilience building blocks, they can promote healthy mental attitude and behavior on campus in some instances. And it can lead to a higher level of retention and graduation. Caribbean ACHEAs can learn from the experiences of other countries based on their particular needs, cultural, legal framework, and socio-economic peculiarities. And in concluding, the authors of this paper, we hope that Caribbean ACHEAs can better appreciate the role that resilience building blocks can play in some instances. Students can be empowered, particularly freshmen, as some of them walk the tightrope of mental health. Lesson drawing will prove to be instructive despite the various innuendos, and we trust that this paper will be a stimulant for more in-depth research and contribute to the improvement in admin practices. New times certainly require new approaches to higher education. I thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, we're going to just ask our next presenter to come, but in the interest of time, we will leave the questions for the end of all the presentations.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon still, ladies and gentlemen. Those of you who have persevered to the end almost, thank you for staying with us. Right, so my title for this presentation says, The Administrator's Role in Promoting Mental Wellness in Higher Education, Lessons Learned at the First University Counseling Center in Jamaica. So I sent in that title and then thought, I better check it out. I'd always assume that. So when I checked it out, so you should fact check before you commit things to writing, I discovered that although I did not know that part of the history, in the 70s, we actually had 2 part-time counselors, one of whom was also a part-time counselor at UTech. So she straddled both campuses. But I can say we were the first to have a full-time counselor. So we actually had a psychiatrist, Dr. Tony Allen, in the 70s, and 2 part-time counselors. And then my colleague, who's just going into retirement, Dr. Angela Gordon-Steer, she was the first full-time counselor beginning in 1980. And so as we think about this, let's hope I'm pressing in the right direction. Okay, so nothing's happening. Okay, all right, so, all right, right. Now, as administrators, I've got 2 questions that are personal. We don't have the time to get feedback right now, but maybe when there's a question or comment time, something I ask here you might want to comment on. But just to think about, as administrators, what value, and I put in brackets, if any, do you think counseling services add to institutions of higher education? Hopefully, you have some ideas about that after today, but just jot down if you want to, a word or 2 which says they add value in this way or that way. All right? Especially thinking about your institution. The next for reflection question is, as an administrator, has a counseling service on your campus come to your mind at any time during the past year? And if yes, what was the context? I'd be interested in knowing that if you give me some feedback later. But did the counseling service come to your mind at any time during the past academic year? And if so, what was the context? Then I want to go on to questions, because the presentation is framed around 4 questions for consideration. And question number 1 of those is, why should mental health issues even be on the agenda of higher education administrators, particularly given the scarcity of resources. As we've heard, many things juggling for place on the budget. Why should mental health issues get space and money? Second key question is, how do administrators get clarity on their role in addressing concerns about mental health? When do you refer? When do you try to help? What else, if anything, can you do to advance that agenda? Question 3, a little lengthy, but let me go through it. What methods are there for collaboration between administrators, staff members, and the counseling services in higher education institutions that will allow for early detection of mental ill health and for the enhancement of good mental health of all members of the community? So that's not only students, but staff as well. And my fourth question was, is there a place for the use of technology to enhance mental health services generally in higher education institutions and to address the mental health needs of students in online or other distance education programs? So we're going to go through those one by one, probably have you some ideas, and there may be things I don't mention that you come up with in the discussion section. But let's start with question 1. And the first paragraph I won't even read because you've heard that all day today. The definition from WHO of mental health. Second paragraph, though, we didn't get to. So I'm going to read that one. It says, mental health is fundamental to our collective and individual ability as humans to think, emote, interact with each other, earn a living, and enjoy life. On this basis, the promotion, protection, and restoration of mental health can be regarded as a vital concern of individuals, communities, and societies throughout the world. And that is obviously therefore true of higher education institutions. So based on this, it should be on our agenda. In addition, for us as ACHEIs, the promotion of good mental health is significant in the matter of student retention, and that has been alluded to, because students with poor mental health will either drop out or sometimes take several years, therefore longer, so taking up somebody else's space, to complete their program. An important question, and this came up for me in a discussion we had with the faculty, and I hadn't thought of it being framed in that way before, but a discussion with one faculty in the last 2 years, the question came up of what is the institutional philosophy on student retention? Does your institution have a philosophy on student retention? Because what came through from that discussion was that the 2 poles are survival of the fittest, take them all in, and who make it through, and who don't make it through, don't make it through. And then on the other end of the pole is the one that says, once we have taken them in, it is our duty to help as many of them as possible to make it through. And I'm going, what's the philosophy of the institution? Because there are different people in the institution, some of whom are operating from over here, survival of the fittest, and some of whom are operating from over there, we've got to do all we can to help them through. And if the institution does not have that vision lined up clear, then sometimes we are at cross purposes in dealing with our students. So I think that's a really important question to get very clear on. Because if it is indeed that we are trying to help as many of them through as possible, it's not survival of the fittest, then mental health services are going to play a really important role in helping them get through, because it affects all areas of student success, whether it is academics like concentration, learning difficulties, or it's communal living like the conflict management in the group work. If you have anything to do with the classes, you know the students hate group work, but it is something they need to learn. Okay, so that's question 1. Question 2, and I pressed too quickly, I believe. Let's see. Okay, I'm going through all my slides too rapidly and not pressing the right thing. Right. Question 2 says, how does mental health fit into the agenda of the administrator? So there's a thing at UWI, I don't know if it's all UWI or it's just UWI Mona, it's a website I took it from. It's called The Distinctive UWI Student. And it says, so my question is, and it's apparently all the campuses. It says, part of it, the description says that the UWI graduate should have good interpersonal skills, be socially and other things responsible, and be guided by strong ethical values. So my question is, what are we doing to produce graduates with those sorts of skill sets that we have there? Because if we juxtapose the WHO statement from the previous slide and this UWI statement, it begs the question, what are we doing to promote good mental health? Because it is good mental health which is going to get us this section of the good, distinctive UWI graduate. Is this even seen as a role of the university in terms of mental health, or is the good mental health, promoting that, or is the approach only one of identifying and getting treatment for members when they have a mental illness? And just a quote from Manthorpe and Stanley in the UK says, student mental health problems are properly the concern of higher education institutions. If we accept that members of the university community need to have good mental health, what is being done to enable this to happen? Because without the buy-in from administrators, this is not going to work well, because resources and programs that are needed will not happen. And an example that came to mind for me is the first-year experience program at UWI, which is one of the ways the Office of Students and Services and Development, so this is not even counseling, this is a different section. They run a program to help our first years adapt. But at UWI Mona, it is only a small number of the total first year population who actually get to do that program, because it's not a mandatory experience. So not all our students go through that. If we were to decide that that was important, then we're going to have to commit resources, money, and find people who will run that particular course. And I just want to point out that in the US, as a reference point, 52% of four-year colleges there require all their first-year students to go through such a program. And there are institutions in the Caribbean. I was speaking yesterday to someone from the University of Bahamas. All their first-year students go through a first-year experience program, which is taught by some of the counselors, but other faculty members as well, too. So it's questions like that in terms of good mental health. Are we looking at models for this? So that would be one of the things that we want to think about. With our scarce resources, where is it best spent? Then our next question, still on that. For all students, participation in higher education offers challenges and opportunities. The task for institutions is to help students to capitalize on the positive mental health benefits of higher education, while identifying and providing appropriate support to those who are more vulnerable to its pressures. Providing them with the support they need to fulfill their potential is not only in the interest of the institution, but also in the interest of the society as a whole. And it points out that many institutions are reviewing their current offering for students to ensure it is promoting self-agency, resilience, and independence in an academic community, and not based on the deficit model of when something is wrong with you. So, moving on to the other point. Oh, again, I think I've gone a little too quickly. Right, collaboration for good mental health is what question 3 referred to. And I have something I've called the coffee hour model. And Dr. Lips is looking at me because he has vague memories of this, right? But at UWI Mona, counselors realized that there was a lack of the sufficient communication for good collaboration between our department and administrators in the faculty and also in student services. And we actually took the initiative to set up an informal, and that's why it's called coffee hour. People were invited to come for coffee. It was not a meeting with minutes formal and the regular thing. It was a chance for people to express concerns, frustrations, ideas, for us to pull them together and see how we could collectively move forward. I must confess that we had every plan to invite folks from the registry and human resource under that last year, and the way we went, we did not end up doing that. When we did our little planning, it's back on the agenda, so hopefully this year we're going to have a similar meeting with people who are administrators in places like registry and ACHEA. The other thing, and we referred to that this morning, is the whole matter of training staff and students to use Sentinel systems. So we do offer sessions that teach faculty and staff how to understand signs of mental ill health, what to look for, and then how to refer that person for counseling as needed. And as Professor Lipp said earlier on, it's really important that people understand that they have a part to play. In many situations, things can be resolved before a referral is needed. And I'll often say that if I have a student or a staff member in my office who has a good support system, I don't worry about their mental health too much, because that support system is going to help them go through. But many of our students and our staff lack that sort of support system. And the fourth question, I don't have my 1 minute yet, but I think she's about to try and do that to me. My fourth question refers to the use of technology to enhance mental health services in face-to-face and distance learning. On the left hand is a flyer that we've used for our UE Helps program. And I was really happy to hear Ms. Blake refer to the fact that she knows about the program, because we've been trying to get that up. Orientation, I say to my students, new students, take out your phones, please. No, in your phones, please write down this number, and I give them UE Helps number and explain to them what it's about. The advantages of UE Helps, it's ease of access by phone, and we got it as a phone call you idea. The students sent us texts. We got a smartphone. They sent us WhatsApp. So they've really led in the process in terms of how it's utilized. So most of our messages come in now by WhatsApp. It's confidential. We have no names unless they want to give us for some reason. It's anonymous. Quick response time, available 24/7 is a little problem because there's one person with the line. So the way I say to the students now is, look, you'll get an answer within 24 hours, within that time period. It's available for students, staff, and in actual fact, it's also used by people who have no connection with the community from time to time. And I'd like to point out that that model, I think, is something which could be used in our open campuses and for students who do online, because that is a constituency that is really, I think, not being taken into good account in terms of their mental health needs. So, like my predecessors have done, let me try and wrap up since I've been given the signal, and just say that the mental health challenge in higher education is to ensure that universities offer effective and accessible support and advice for students, at the same time as making it clear to all that institutions are academic and not therapeutic communities in the sense of treatment communities. We must also understand that we have a role in helping to destigmatize mental health, because universities are leaders in terms of thought. So, my final question for you, in the right order, is what will your role be in promoting good mental health on your campus? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Please welcome our next speaker, Georgiana Richardson.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm told I have 15 minutes, so here goes. My topic is developing a model for campus safety, which is inclusive of mental health, but it's geared to the role of the administrator. Now, some of my colleagues have actually incorporated some of the things that I'm going to say, so I will skip over those things and I'll just go towards some of the more relevant points. But my focus really is on violence on campuses, the impact of violence on campuses, on mental health, and the role of the administrator, and what the administrator can do to alleviate such situations and to promote mental health and decrease violence on campuses. Now, the World Health Organization, they have defined violence as the intentional use of physical force, of power, threatened or actual against oneself, right? So if you do your self-harm, that is violence. Another person, a group, a community, and that would result in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation. Now, why the focus on violence? All right? Okay, the Global Campaign for Violence Prevention Resolution, the 49th World Health Assembly declared that violence is a leading worldwide public health problem. Not only so, but we're looking at campus violence statistics, and unfortunately I didn't have much statistics for the Caribbean, and time was short, so I picked up on something here: school shootings in the United States. And when I'm speaking of campuses, I am looking at tertiary campuses, but we also could look and focus on secondary school campuses, because that is where most of the violence right now is happening, right? So we have here some statistics from 2013 to 2019. I won't go into any deep analysis, just pointing out that in 2018 it had reached its peak. Some more statistics. Campus Safety, that's a journal. They said that there were 750,000 incidents of violent crime in U.S. schools in 2013 to 14 school year. CNN has also done an analysis, and they were saying for the first 21 weeks in the year, there were 23 shootings where students got hurt and killed. So that's like one shooting per week, from the 12th grade to university level. All right, so what has happened in the US, but we haven't seen it happening yet in the Caribbean, the US schools were asked to draw up, or campuses were asked to draw up a safety plan for their campuses, right? And this is something that administrators here can advocate for, getting a safety plan for your campus that would make it safer and have less violence. All right, so what are some of the focus on violent crimes? We have mass shootings in the US, gang violence, reprisal shootings in Trinidad. I don't know if you have it here. Rapes, violent attacks such as assault on teachers and students from different sources. It could be even from among your colleagues, from outside, from fellow students. Bomb threats, gender discrimination and violence. We have to face it, people. It's happening. We have the gay, LGBT, etc. And in the Caribbean, you know, it's sort of taboo, but we have to face it. And these people are at a minority, and they are open to attacks and violence. Also domestic violence, right? Among students, among staff, everyone on the campus, they are affected in one way or the other. So it's not just the students are affected, it's the staff. You have visitors, you have contractors, you have tenants on campus. So it's important that our campuses be made safer. All right, some of the root causes of violence. I am not a psychologist or so, but I got my information from American Psychological Association. And some of the causes were frustration. Why I'm going into this? Because the administrator needs to be knowledgeable and also need to know some of these root causes. So frustration, exposure to violent media games, exposure to violence in the home, drug and alcohol abuse, environmental factors such as heat and overcrowding. I've read some articles on reaction to prescribed drugs for mental problems, exposure to trauma. Being in a minority group, I alluded to that a short while ago. Gang warfare communities. Some disabled people, if you do some research, they are physically challenged, and they are also open to violence because they can't fight back as a stronger person can do, and mental health problems. So there are legal obligations of safety and good health, and when we're talking about good health, we're also talking about mental health as defined by my colleague earlier on. So we have the UK, the legal obligation to mental health. We also have Trinidad and Tobago Safety and Health Act 2004, and we also have the Articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which says that everyone has the right to life, freedom, personal security, threats and violence. Everybody have a right to be free from that, and also freedom from discrimination, which gives rise again to violence. So we said we're looking at secondary school campuses and tertiary education campuses, right? And what are some of the impact of violence on campuses? It gives our campus a poor environment when we have a rise in violence. Even if it's just a teeny little thing, especially if it's the university. We had a little something earlier on at our St. Augustine campus, and there were protests, there were the press, police. You want to keep your image looking good, right? Loss of students, loss of revenue, the negative impact on mental health. How many people have heard about survivors' suicide? Somebody would survive a mass shooting, but eventually what will happen? They will commit suicide. Why is this? We as administrators, what can we do about this? How could we impact? The fear and discomfort experienced by all, poor performance, low academic grades, unsafe working environment, right? So this was from the Journal of Interpersonal Violence, some of it, and Flavery et al., they had an article. So we're going to look at, very briefly, at a model for campus security and administrators' perspective. Now, the traditional role of the administrator is changing, right? But at the same time, some of the areas that he has to get into, some of the problems he has to deal with is very multifaceted. And he cannot do it alone. He cannot be administrator, psychologist, safety manager, security manager. So how does he accomplish his task in terms of violence on campus, in terms of promoting the safety and well-being of the campus community? How can he do that? Okay, one of the ways he can do that is by working with other agencies, working with other departments. My colleague called it the coffee, what do you call it? The coffee hour, right? But we have to go beyond that, okay? So, if I want to make my campus safe as an administrator, one of the first steps I will do, I will go to my safety department. There's a safety department, I would hope, in every campus. Let's use our campus, all right? And I would network with them. How can I make my area of the campus safe? How can we make this whole campus safe? So you have committees like safety committees, all right? Where there will be official meetings, there will be official minutes, documents recorded, but you have to interface, right? You have to develop and promote policies and procedures. How do you do that? You have to network, because if you don't, you will be like on an island by yourself, and you would not be following proper procedure. You would not be exposed to the wealth of knowledge that other organizations and other departments would have, right? Information sharing, okay. So the other thing is we try to develop a positive safety culture. In developing a positive safety culture, you have to let others buy into it. If others are not part of it, all your stakeholders on the campus, your stakeholders are like the students, the staff, visitors, whoever is involved in the campus, right? If you don't let them buy into it, here's what's going to happen. They're going to treat safety, violence, whatever on campus in an ad hoc way. So you have to let them be a part of it, buy into it, and also bring in their ideas and make them feel also that their ideas are important and they are being listened to. Your student guild, that's another stakeholder, very important stakeholder that you need to buy in to your policies and your procedures and in developing a safety culture. Now, it's all right to have a good discussion over coffee and so on, but as the safety laws would have it, you need to have something written risk assessments. What are the problems? What are the risks? What are the hazards on your campus? How are you going to identify them? How are you going to eliminate them? And if you can't eliminate them, how would you treat with them? Right? So these are some of the things that you have to do if you look at the ACHEA model tells you that you have to do a written risk assessment. Once you have 5 persons employed, you have to have a written risk assessment, and that risk assessment has to be updated every 6 months. And then you have a whole procedure of quality assurance, monitoring, evaluation, controls. Now, how do we as administrators assist, okay, in that area? How do we connect with safety on campus, even though we may not know much about all the security knowledge and security aspects and so on? Be alert and up to date, right? You need to be knowledgeable about your organization in and out of your department. Sometimes you have to interface with outside agencies, Ministry of National Security, the police force, right? Network with interdisciplinary teams. So you need a team. If you want to control safety, you need to have professionals who would advise you, like your safety management professional, your psychologist, your security expert. Have regular meetings with them. Recognize the signs of violence and refer appropriately. So my colleague here also spoke about recognizing some signs of violence or some signs of mental health, which is sort of kind of borders, all right? Encourage communication on all fronts. Encourage a buy-in, I mentioned that, and make recommendations for improvements. So we've looked at some of the warning signs and so on. But I don't have much time again, so I just want to mention one thing that I found in the research. What I found in the research, What I found in the research is that the victims get a lot of counseling. But with suicidal survival, how do we measure if that counseling is enough? They would get counseling, yes, but still they go on to commit suicide. And very quickly, I just want to mention that the perpetrators, all right, do we just incarcerate them? In our Trinidadian society, in the penal system, there is no allowance made for rehabilitation in terms of like drug rehabilitation and also counseling formally. So these perpetrators, they go into jail and there is no formal rehabilitation process and they may come out much worse. All right? So this is one of the areas that administrators can push for policies. Push for policies that could revise penal systems that can have less perpetrators, because, you know, in a way, violence breeds violence. And if it's not approached in a proactive manner, it can get worse. So, in wrapping up, I want to say that administrators have a great part to play, but they must network with other professional teams, professions in other areas, such as counselors, such as security advisors, and so on, right? And in doing so, they would make their campus a better place, a safer place, and a more mentally healthy place. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, ladies, for your very, very important research. Those papers were well, the data that you got and the information that you gave us is very timely, because I don't know if everyone here would have heard about the increase in violence in our schools here in Jamaica, as well as violence against children. Even though it's another topic, it is somewhat related. I'm going to open the floor for any questions. Anyone with any questions or comments?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jacqueline Ben from the UWI Field campus. The first speaker, I can't remember your name, sorry.
Veronica.
Right, Veronica. You mentioned incorporating mental health into the overall health section in order to kind of reduce the stigma and to enhance anonymity in terms of where people are going. But I was also wondering if that wouldn't to some degree promote the sense of medical illness, instead of having it in like the student services, where there are a variety of services available, and when a student comes there, he or she, nobody knows what they're coming for. That was one question or one thought. The other one was with regard, this is to Dr. Sharon Williams Brown, where you said that using the messaging system, it was anonymous, and my thought was, if a student, because of its anonymity, you don't know who it is. If a student expresses suicidal ideation, then how do you deal with that if the person is anonymous? And to the last speaker, I was wondering if you have the behavioral intervention team, and if there's collaboration among the various campuses with regard to campus security. Thanks.
Okay, at the UWI Mona campus, for persons who are struggling with mental illness, they can get help from our health center. Mrs. Williams Brown, she's a part of the health center, and within that department, they cater for mental illness issues. All right, I am thinking that that is very good, because in going there, they might realize that there might also be physical ailments that might be related to the mental illness. So it could be a one-stop shop. So based on our experience, I'm seeing where it is working. So I had that particularly in mind.
Press the top right there.
Here? Yes. Is this one?
No, press the top.
All right, yes. Okay. Just a quick comment on that, because both models I've actually seen, and Mona in particular has the remit for employees as well as students, hence our being health center. Some of the other campuses and institutions, the council's remit is students only. And in that case, and EAP becomes an important part for the staff. And even in our situation, we're finding it very, we really are not being able to address staff needs with a limited complement in the way we want to. So yes, working with HR, but just bringing that up. The question you asked in terms of the anonymity and suicidal intent, a lot has to do with training. Your hotline person has to be very well trained. The truth is, with suicide, you can have somebody in your office today. You do not think, with all the work you've done, that they are going to do it. They leave your office and they do it that night. It is a reality that for many people in counseling we've had to deal with. You assess, you do everything within your power, and somebody is still going to suicide. We are fortunate in our institutions. Our rate is nothing like the US rate. So we're fortunate that way. But training on a helpline is one of the specific things that the helpline person gets trained in terms of, and usually we've had those situations and the counselor has always been able to eventually get enough information for there to be an intervention or to get a family member involved eventually.
Yeah, your question to me is that if there is any collaboration within, among the campuses. I do not think so. What is happening is that there is a push towards OSHA, right? Occupational Health and Safety, but not enough emphasis on my campus, as I know it, has been placed on safety. And we're trying to get them to do that. I had a talk with the security director, actually, right? And he has a lot of challenges. And safety, as it were, is not only safety, occupational health, but it's also, your security, your personal safety, and, with regards to violence and so on. So this is one of the aspects that we probably could be discussed and developed, and also there'll be a collaboration among campuses to share intellectual and other resources. No.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, are there any other? Yes, there's one. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I have two comments, and I want to compliment the presenters for all the work they've done. And I'm sure we'll follow up individually with them if there are things that we are unable to accommodate during this time. When Veronica, I think it was, I'm Godfrey Steele from UWI St. Augustine. Sorry for not introducing myself. When Veronica Forbes Blake referred to self-medication, she was speaking about she was advising against doing that. And I couldn't help but link that recommendation to the reference to technology when Sharon Williams-Brown spoke. There is some research showing that persons self-medicate by using online applications, checklists. In the case of depression, for example, persons try to assess themselves without the necessary training and expertise for doing that, and that sometimes results in very unpleasant outcomes and very tragic outcomes. And so some of these freely available apps sometimes are used in a technological way that is not always in the most positive way. So I just thought I would put that on the table for a comment. And the second thing I wanted to do was to ask Veronica if she could say a little bit more about the methodology used that led to the results that you shared with us. Thank you.
Documentary. So what we did, we actually looked at the work of several. Yes. The method we used was that of documentary research. Mm-hmm. So what we did was to examine the work of all of these people. Yes. But the discussion time did not allow for me to get into them, okay, to tear them apart analyze them and to put in our perspective. Time just didn't allow me, but
course.
all of that is in there.
But thank you for, well, if it's documentary, that helps to understand that, yes. And the other one, yes?
I was just, is it the social media one that you wanted us to go on to comment on?
Yes, yes.
If I can take that, I agree with you that more students are coming into my office, for example, saying, I'm depressed, and it comes from a checklist they've done.
Yes.
And they're not clinically depressed, but they are having some symptoms.
Yes.
So in some ways, I view what's happening online as helping to raise awareness. A good site gives education, but I also think that we have to recommend good sites to the students. So
Yes.
one of the things we're actually doing now is trying to put together a list of sites and apps that we can advertise and recommend to students, rather than it just being there going on
Yes.
and finding something which we really have no control over, because they're going to do Google for everything.
Yes.
But if we can say this is reputable,
Yes.
the way we know Mayo is compared to Dr. So-and-so,
Yes.
you know, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? I do have one question. I don't know if anyone has done any research or related anything to the high schools, because sometimes they come in with problems that are more difficult to deal with when they get to the tertiary institutions. And I work with a very small, or relatively small institution, and one of the things I realize is they come in with the problems. So we talk about them having problems and developing problems when they come to the institutions, but is there any research or any future research that is coming regarding that?
Really can't speak to that, because part of the problem of being a practitioner becomes the time for research. Prof. Lips may know if there's anything out there, but the research in terms of psychology, I think, is still a very wide open field, because there's a lot of stuff that we really haven't gone in and gotten the data for yet. So you bring up an interesting area.
And it would be good to maybe collaborate with the Ministry of Education, because the high schools, I don't think they're equipped with enough guidance counselors. Some of them have no counselor whatsoever.
Their ratio, though, is much better than ours.
Yes.
The prescribed ratio in high school is 1 to 500.
Yes.
The prescribed ratio, prescribed in terms of the American system, 1 to 1,500 at the university, because there's certain things high school guidance counselors do that we don't do. The ratio at Mona, there are 4 full-time counselors, and the population is like 15,000 students. Plus we see staff and staff dependents. Couldn't resist putting that in. Thank you.
No problem. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying the course, and we want to thank the presenters once again. I wish everyone a wonderful evening. If there are no more questions, you are free to go.